I knew things were going downhill the exact moment Bradley used the word synergy 3 times in his first 5-minute staff meeting. This kid was fresh out of business school, wearing loafers with no socks, and carrying himself like he had just personally saved the American economy. In reality, the only thing he had ever saved was the contacts list on his new iPhone. He had just inherited the corner office from his father, Winston Vance, the man who used to call me the anchor of this entire company. For 17 years, I was the guy who kept Vance Dynamics running. I started back when our offices were just 2 rented desks in a drafty warehouse and our servers regularly overheated if someone ran the microwave. I was there before the funding rounds, before we had 150 employees, and long before Bradley was old enough to drive. Winston built this place on sweat and solid logic. He always told me, Harvey, processes are what keep a company alive when the founders are gone. I took that to heart. I made sure every contract, every compliance audit, and every partnership agreement had a clean paper trail, a notarized signature, and a backup copy stored off-site. My official title was Chief Operations Liaison. But in reality, I was the one who kept the wheels on the wagon. When the legal team got stuck, when vendors got difficult, or when the board needed to verify our corporate charter, I was the person they called. I did my job quietly, without drama, and without ever needing to shout. Then Winston got sick. About a year ago, the memory lapses started. First, it was forgotten meeting times. Then he started repeating the same stories. And eventually, he could not remember the names of our biggest clients. The board panicked. In their panic, they did what weak boards always do. They handed the keys to Bradley, Winston's only son, under the assumption that the name Vance on his birth certificate made up for his total lack of common sense. From the day Bradley walked into the executive suite, I could feel the clock ticking. He did not like me because I knew too much about the actual operations, and I did not look like the kind of people he wanted to associate with. I was 58, wore denim shirts, and did not care about his crypto portfolio. Soon, my calendar invites started disappearing. People I had mentored for a decade suddenly stopped copying me on project emails. I overheard Bradley telling the HR director, Sarah Finch, that I possessed museum energy and was holding back their digital transitions. But when people underestimate you, they also stop watching you. That gave me plenty of time. Quiet time to pull up old corporate filings from 2009, documents that had been signed and notarized by Winston himself when we first incorporated. You see, Winston was a paranoid man back in the day. He was terrified that if he ever lost control, a greedy board or an incompetent relative would destroy everything we had built. So, we designed a legal safety net. A set of rules buried deep within the charter that had very sharp teeth. I did not make a scene as Bradley began changing things. I did not complain when he replaced our reliable shipping partner with a startup owned by his former college roommate. I did not say a word when he deleted our internal database and replaced it with a shared digital workspace that crashed twice a week. What I did do was renew my notary public license, download 3 copies of our original 2009 charter, and start keeping a detailed log of every single HR interaction in a private encrypted folder. I knew the blow was coming. Bradley was too arrogant to keep me around, and he was too cowardly to face me directly. The trap sprung on a Tuesday morning. It was 7:59 a.m. I was locking my car in the parking garage when my phone buzzed. A meeting invite had been sent at 7:56 a.m. Subject line read, brief discussion. Location, HR Conference Room B. Bradley did not even have the courage to schedule it during normal business hours. He wanted to do it before the rest of the staff arrived to avoid any witnesses. When I walked in, Bradley was sitting at the glass table, sipping some organic green drink. Sarah Finch, our HR director, sat next to him, staring down at her notepad. She would not meet my eye. Bradley did not waste any time. Harvey, he said, leaning back, we are looking at our operational alignment for the next fiscal year, and we have decided to sunset your position. We want to thank you for your historical contributions, but we need to optimize our workflow for the future. He actually smiled when he said historical, as if he was describing a dusty relic in a glass case. He told me that they had already prepared my severance package, but there was a catch. I had to sign a non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement right then and there to get it. I did not scream. I did not argue. I just looked at him and nodded once. I reached across the table, picked up my briefcase, and stood up. I did not sign a single paper. They slid across the table. Bradley looked confused. "Aren't you going to sign?" he asked. "This is a very generous offer, Harvey. Consider it your final lesson in modern business. Sometimes you have to make room for innovation." I did not answer. I walked out of the room, took the elevator down to the garage, and sat in my car. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was anger. I started the engine, drove 3 blocks to my bank, and deposited my final regular paycheck, which had been direct deposited that morning. I made sure to print a physical receipt with the exact timestamp. It was Tuesday, 8:22 a.m. That timestamp was the key. Next, I drove to the local notary office. I signed the formal execution notice of Section 4.8 of our 2009 Operational Reversion Agreement. The notary stamped it, signed it, and handed it back. By 9:02 a.m., I was at a same-day courier service. I paid $50 to have the envelope delivered directly to our general counsel, Valerie Albright, with instructions that it must be signed for by her and her alone. No assistants, no HR managers. I drove back, parked across the street from our office building, and watched from a coffee shop window. At 12:03 p.m., my phone showed the delivery was complete, signed by Valerie. What Bradley did not know was that the document now sitting on the general counsel's desk was not a lawsuit or a complaint. It was a ticking legal clock. Section 4.8 of the Vance Dynamics Charter clearly stated that if I, Harvey Cole, were ever involuntarily terminated without a unanimous vote of the board of directors and a written 30-day notice, the operational control of the entire company would immediately begin reverting to the Vance Founders Trust. The transition period was exactly 72 business hours from the moment of execution. And the best part of all? The trust's designated successor, the person who would take absolute veto power over all operational decisions if the clause was triggered, was not Bradley. It was me. By Tuesday afternoon, the Slack channels at Vance Dynamics were already heating up. A colleague who still had a shred of loyalty forwarded me a screenshot from our main announcements channel. Bradley had posted an animated image of a broom sweeping dust out a door, with the caption, "Spring Cleaning, Team. Out with the old, in with the optimized." Underneath, his newly appointed VP of Strategy, Cody, had reacted with a fire emoji. Another manager added a clapping hands icon. I sat in my home office, looking at the screen while taking a sip of black coffee. It was a modest setup, just a wooden desk by the window and a view of the street, but it was quiet. The silence was nice. Inside our headquarters, however, the silence was of a different kind. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of people waiting to see where the axe would fall next. They did not have to wait long. On Wednesday morning, Bradley started what he called his efficiency restructuring. In reality, it was a purge of anyone who remembered what the company looked like before he arrived. First was the VP of Vendor Relations, a man named Marcus who had negotiated every major supplier contract we had for 10 years. Then went our payroll systems manager, who kept our tax compliance flawless. But the one that stung the most was Audrey Miller. Audrey had been with the company since 2012. She had built our client onboarding framework from scratch, and she was the kind of person who brought homemade chicken soup to the office when someone called in sick. She was escorted out of the building by a junior security guard at 11:30 a.m., not even allowed to send a farewell email to her team. In their place, the new blood arrived. Bradley brought in his college roommates and frat brothers from his university days. Cody, who once got suspended for throwing a whiteboard keg party, was now our chief strategy officer. He had no tech background, unless you counted posting motivational cryptocurrency threads on social media. Another buddy, Tristan, was hired as the head of organizational vibes. I am not making that title up. His job was literally to organize office happy hours and post pep talks about energy alignment. My contacts inside the building kept sending me screenshots of Bradley's morning messages. Legacy does not equal loyalty. One announcement read on Wednesday afternoon: "We are building a disruptive ecosystem, not a retirement home. Keep your vibe clean." One of our senior developers privately messaged me, saying, "This place feels like a LinkedIn post grew legs and started firing people." I had to laugh, but it was a bitter laugh. I knew how much work had gone into building those foundations, and I was watching a group of children burn it down to roast marshmallows. What Bradley did not realize was that his little restructuring was exposing the company to massive legal liability. Under the Federal Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, also known as the Warner Act under 29 U.S.C. 2101, a company of our size cannot conduct a mass layoff or eliminate key operational roles without giving at least 60 days written notice. By summarily escorting us out the door, Bradley was setting up Vance Dynamics for a class action lawsuit that could cost millions in back pay and civil penalties. But that was just the secondary trap. The primary fuse was already burning down. The 72-hour reversion clock was ticking. I spent Wednesday afternoon reviewing my files. I had 3 copies of the original 2009 Operational Reversion Agreement. The clause was very specific. If the Chief Operations Liaison were involuntarily terminated, without a formal documented board review and written notification, all operational authority would transfer to the Vance Founders Trust within 72 business hours. The clock had started the second Bradley fired me at 7:59 a.m. on Tuesday. By my calculations, the transition would become official on Friday morning at 7:59 a.m. Meanwhile, Bradley was acting like a king who had just conquered a new territory. I was told he ordered a fully catered lunch of organic poke bowls and kombucha for his new leadership team on Wednesday. During a toast, he talked about eliminating legacy friction and paving the way for automated management. That afternoon, his assistant apparently brought him a memo from the legal department. Valerie Albright, our general counsel, had flagged my notarized courier envelope and suggested an immediate review of our 2009 corporate filings. According to the assistant, Bradley did not even look up from his phone. He just waved his hand and said, "Tell Valerie we sunsetted all those old agreements during the last audit. Legal is just being overly cautious. Tell them to focus on the new compliance templates." But he was wrong. We had sunsetted the operational guidelines, but the core charter documents, signed and sealed by Winston Vance himself, could not be changed without a unanimous vote of the board and Winston's written consent. And Winston, due to his health, had not signed a corporate document in over 9 months. I checked my burner phone. The Slack leaks were continuing to roll in. A project manager sent me a copy of our projected Q4 cash flow spreadsheet. Bradley had replaced my name in the author metadata with his own, adding a header that read, "Optimized by CEO." I looked at the formulas in the sheet. They were still my formulas, my color coding, and my notes. The kid did not even know how to format a spreadsheet cell, let alone optimize a multi-million-dollar cash flow. I closed my laptop, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. The cracks were starting to spread in the foundation of Vance Dynamics. Bradley was so busy looking at the view from the penthouse that he did not hear the concrete shifting beneath his feet. By late Thursday afternoon, the panic inside the executive suite had finally begun to leak through the floorboards. I knew this because at exactly 4:15 p.m., I received a series of automatic security alerts on my personal email. My login credentials for the Vance Dynamics internal HR portal, which had been deactivated on Tuesday morning, were suddenly reactivated. I logged in using a read-only token I had saved on my personal drive. I watched in real time as someone in the HR department opened my employee profile. They were attempting to edit my termination date. They wanted to backdate it from Tuesday morning to the previous Friday afternoon. It was a desperate amateur move. If they could prove I was terminated on Friday, they could argue that the 72-hour reversion window had already expired before I delivered my formal execution notice to the General Counsel on Tuesday. But they were playing chess against someone who had written the rulebook. I immediately took screen recordings of the HR database modifications, capturing the IP address of the user making the changes, which traced directly to Sarah Finch's office computer. More importantly, I already had the absolute, undeniable physical receipts. I had my bank deposit slip from Tuesday at 8:22 a.m., showing my final paycheck had been processed as a post-termination payout. I had the courier's digital delivery receipt showing General Counsel Valerie Albright had signed for my notarized package at 12:03 p.m. on Tuesday. And I had a recorded voicemail from Valerie's assistant confirming receipt of my notice. Under state law, any attempt to alter these records after the fact was a direct violation of California Penal Code Section 470, which covers forgery and the falsification of corporate documents. I forwarded the screen recordings and the file comparison to my lawyer. She replied with a 2-word email, "Let them." If they tried to present a forged, backdated document to a court or a board, they would render their entire defense void ab initio, which is a legal term meaning null from the very beginning. Meanwhile, Valerie Albright was not sitting on her hands. Unlike Bradley, she was a real professional who understood that a corporate charter is a binding contract, not a suggestion. She had spent the last 24 hours locked in the records room with 2 paralegals, digging through the physical binders from 2009. She found the original ink-signed copy of the operational reversion agreement. She also found the compliance audit reports from 2018, where both Winston Vance and the board of directors had reaffirmed Section 4.8. It was signed, sealed, and completely valid. Valerie immediately called Meredith, the chair of the board of directors. Meredith was a sensible, retired executive who had helped Winston secure our first major round of institutional funding. She was not a fan of Bradley's loud frat boy management style, but she had stayed quiet to keep the peace. Until now, when Valerie explained the legal reality, Meredith's response was immediate. She ordered Valerie to schedule an emergency board session for Friday morning at 8 a.m., exactly 72 hours after my termination. Bradley was not invited to the initial prep call, though he was ordered to attend the main meeting. Bradley, of course, was still completely blind to the storm. He spent Thursday evening filming a video on the office balcony for his personal social media page, talking about how he was modernizing a legacy tech brand and removing institutional drag. In the comments, his new head of vibes, Tristan, wrote, "Let's go, CEO." Disrupting the dinosaurs. Later that night, another anonymous tip came through my burner phone. Bradley had sent a Slack message to his core circle, bragging that my entire job could be replaced by a basic software plugin that cost $19 a month. I did not reply to the message. I just saved the screenshot to a folder on my encrypted drive. I named the folder Ignition Files. It already contained the notarized agreement, my bank receipts, the HR database edit logs, and a video of Bradley during an onboarding meeting where he pronounced fiduciary duty as fiduciary duty. I checked the countdown. The 72-hour reversion period was entering its final 12 hours. The board meeting was set for 8 a.m. The stage was set. Bradley thought he was preparing a presentation on Q4 growth, but he was actually walking straight into a legal buzzsaw. And the best part was, he had built it himself. The boardroom was freezing when the board members reconvened at 8 a.m. on Friday. It was not just the air conditioning. The atmosphere had the quiet, heavy tension of a courtroom right before the jury walks in. Bradley came in 5 minutes late. He was carrying a green juice in a glass jar, wearing his usual half-zip sweater and designer jeans, and looking like he had just strolled in from a tech networking breakfast. He was trying to project his usual casual confidence. But I was told by a sole source inside the room that his hands were slightly twitching. The swagger had curdled into something thin and nervous. He sat down and immediately started setting up his laptop. "Morning, everyone," he said, not looking at anyone in particular. "I have got some great slides on our brand optimization and the new organizational structure Cody and Tristan designed. We are looking at a 15% overhead reduction." No one smiled. No one even opened their notebooks. Valerie Albright, our general counsel, remained standing at the far end of the long mahogany table. In front of her were 3 folders, a blue one, a yellow one, and a sealed black manila envelope that bore the heavy red wax seal of the Vance Founders Trust. Valerie adjusted her glasses. "Bradley," she said, her voice completely flat and professional, "we are not reviewing slides today. We have a governance emergency." Bradley laughed, a short, dry sound. "A governance emergency? Come on, Valerie. If this is about Harvey's legal threat, my team has already handled it. HR audited the records, and his termination date is clean. It is a non-issue." Valerie did not blink. She opened the yellow folder and slid a document across the table. It was a printed copy of the HR system log showing Sarah Finch's computer modifying my employee profile at 4:15 p.m. on Thursday. "This is the system edit trail from yesterday," Valerie said. The HR department attempted to backdate Harvey's termination to last Friday. This activity was flagged by our security systems, and it constitutes an illegal alteration of corporate records. More importantly, it is irrelevant. We have verified Harvey's bank deposit receipt and the courier delivery confirmation, both timestamped on Tuesday. The 72-hour reversion clause was triggered on Tuesday morning at 7:59 a.m. Bradley's smile faded. Okay, so what? So we triggered some old clause from 2009. We have a majority board. We can just vote to override it. It is a simple administrative fix. Valerie shook her head. No, we cannot. I spent the last 24 hours reviewing the corporate charter with outside counsel. Section 4.8 of the Operational Reversion Agreement is an absolute covenant. It was reaffirmed during the 2018 audit signed by your father, Winston Vance, and 2 board members who are still in this room. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The clause states that if Harvey Cole is involuntarily terminated without a 30-day written notice and a unanimous board vote, operational control of Vance Dynamics immediately reverts to the founder's trust. The board has no override authority unless Winston Vance signs a written veto. And as we all know, Winston is medically incapacitated and cannot sign any legal document. Bradley stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. This is ridiculous. You are telling me a multi-million-dollar technology company is going to halt operations because of a piece of paper signed 17 years ago? We are a modern enterprise. We do not run on ancient history. Meredith, the board chair, tapped her pen against her portfolio. We run on contracts, Bradley. And right now, the contract says you do not have the authority to make operational decisions. Valerie picked up the sealed black envelope. The trust guidelines state that in the event of an operational reversion, control is transferred to the designated successor named in the trust's files. This envelope was sealed by Winston Vance in 2019, witnessed by 2 attorneys, and notarized. She took a letter opener, sliced the top of the envelope, and pulled out a single sheet of heavy ivory paper. She read it silently, then turned the paper and slid it across the table to Meredith. Meredith looked at the name, sighed softly, and passed it to the board member next to her. One by one, the sheet of paper made its way around the table. The silence in the room grew so deep, you could hear the hum of the servers in the closet. Bradley's voice cracked. Just say the name. Who is it? Is it one of the external board members? Meredith looked up at him, her face completely expressionless. The designated successor is Harvey Cole. Bradley actually stumbled back a step, hitting the edge of the credenza. No, that is a mistake. Harvey was a liaison. He was an administrator. He was museum energy. You cannot hand the company to him. Valerie closed her folder. The trust document is legally binding, Bradley. The 72-hour transition window closes at exactly 7:59 a.m. today. In precisely 1 minute, Harvey Cole becomes the interim controller of all corporate operations, with absolute veto power over all vendor contracts, hirings, terminations, and financial disbursements. Bradley looked around the room, desperate, searching for any ally. Cody and Tristan were not there. They were not board members. The external board members just stared at their hands or looked out the window. They were business people. They knew when a game was lost. And then the boardroom door opened. I walked into the boardroom at exactly 8:01 a.m. I was not wearing a designer suit or expensive loafers. I had on my usual faded denim shirt, a pair of dark jeans, and a simple black portfolio under my arm. I did not have an entourage. I did not need one. Every eye in the room followed me as I walked to the head of the table. I did not look at Bradley. I did not need to see the panic on his face to know it was there. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table. The one Winston Vance had sat in for 15 years, and sat down. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of quiet that belongs in a courtroom before a sentence is read. Meredith, the board chair, looked at me and nodded once. Harvey, she said, her voice steady. The board acknowledges the activation of Section 4.8 of the Operational Reversion Agreement. The transition window is closed. You have assumed operational oversight of Vance Dynamics. Effective immediately, I opened my portfolio, pulled out a small black USB drive, and slid it into the port on the table. The boardroom screen came to life, displaying a document I had prepared with my lawyer on Wednesday night. Thank you, Meredith, I said. I do not plan to waste any time. We have a company to repair. I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. It was titled Immediate Operational Restructuring. First order of business, I said. We are terminating the employment of Cody, Acting Chief Strategy Officer, and Tristan, Head of Organizational Vibes, effective immediately. Their roles are eliminated for cause, specifically a total lack of qualifications and a direct breach of fiduciary duty under state corporate law. Their access to company systems was cut off 3 minutes ago. Bradley let out a choked sound. You cannot do that. Cody is my CSO. Tristan is managing our entire team culture. I finally looked at him. I did not look angry. I did not look smug. I just looked at him the way an adult looks at a child who has just spilled milk on a clean rug. Actually, Bradley, I can, I said. And I just did. I clicked the remote again. Second order of business. We are immediately reinstating Audrey Miller and the 3 other senior operations staff who were terminated this week. They will return to their original roles on Monday morning with full back pay and a formal letter of apology from the board. This resolves our immediate exposure under the Federal Warning Act, which would have cost this company over $200,000 in penalties. I clicked the remote a third time. Third, we are canceling the new shipping contract with Bradley's roommate's startup. We are returning to our original logistics partner immediately. This startup contract was signed without competitive bidding and at a 40% markup, which represents a clear waste of corporate assets. The board members were nodding. The gray-haired man who had been tapping his pen was now taking notes, a thin smile on his lips. They were seeing a business being stabilized in real time. Bradley stepped forward, his face red, his voice shaking with pure rage. This is my father's company. I am a Vance. You are just an employee, Harvey. You cannot just walk in here and undo everything I did. I will call him. I will have him fire you. I stood up. I was not shouting. My voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. Your father built this company on structure and respect, Bradley. He knew that names do not keep servers running or paychecks cleared. Processes do, and he trusted me to protect those processes from exactly what you became. I reached into my portfolio, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the glass table to him. This is your separation agreement, Bradley. The board has already signed off on it. You are being suspended from your duties as CEO pending a full financial and operational audit. You will receive a standard severance, but you will not have access to this building, these systems, or any company assets. Security is waiting outside to escort you to your vehicle. Bradley looked at the paper, then looked at the board members. None of them would meet his eye. Even Meredith was looking down at her portfolio. He was completely alone. He looked back at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He took the paper, his hands shaking so hard it rattled against the glass. I leaned forward slightly, looking him straight in the eyes. Consider that your final lesson, Bradley. He turned, grabbed his laptop bag, and walked out the door. The 2 security guards waiting in the hallway quietly stepped in behind him, guiding him toward the elevators. I sat back down, looked around the table at the remaining board members, and clicked the next slide on the screen. Now, I said, let us talk about Q4. And that, my friends, is how a 58-year-old museum piece reclaimed the house that he helped build. Bradley wanted synergy, but what he got was a lesson in foundation. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more arrogant corporate bosses get dismantled by the rules they thought they were above, do not forget to smash that subscribe button. It keeps this coffee pot running, and it ensures we keep delivering these stories straight to your feed. Thanks for watching.